The waves moved like breath, steady, soft, and endless. Eliot stood at the edge of the rocky path, staring at the old lighthouse that now belonged to him. The ocean spread wide behind it, dark and calm, a quiet force that had always made him feel small, but safe. The lighthouse was tall and simple, white paint peeled from its sides like old skin. One window glowed with soft yellow light. That light meant the power was still working. That was good. He took a slow breath, the salty air filling his lungs. The breeze was cool but not cold. It moved past his face and neck like a whisper. Eliot had no reason to hurry. He walked forward slowly, his boots crunching the damp gravel. Each step made a sound, but the ocean hushed it all. He liked that. At the heavy wooden door, he paused. His key turned with a soft click. The door creaked open. The inside was warm and dim, the kind of quiet that sinks into your bones. He stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. He was alone, but it didn't feel empty. The space was small, simple. One chair near the fireplace, a table, a kettle, a bed in the corner, covered in soft gray blankets. Books lined a low shelf, each one chosen for peace, not excitement. Stories meant for quiet hours. A window faced the sea. Through it, he could see the silver shine of the waves rolling in and out. Forever. He set his bag down by the wall. No rush to unpack, not tonight. He walked over to the fireplace. No fire yet, but the wood was stacked neatly. The last owner had been kind or thoughtful. Eliot knelt down and lit it with a single match. The flame grew slowly, licking the dry wood, casting shadows that danced across the walls. He sat in the chair and let out a soft sigh. He had made it. After so many months of noise, motion, and decisions, he had arrived at stillness. No deadlines, no phone calls, no one expecting anything. Just the sea, the wind, the lighthouse, and time. The ocean spoke through the window, not with words, but with rhythm. Waves touched the rocks again and again. Never angry, never bored, just steady. Eliot leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened. He didn't need to think. He didn't need to plan. He just needed to be here. The room was warm now. The fire crackled low and calm. The light from the flame flickered gently on the iced ceiling. Shadows moved like waves themselves, soft, slow, and without meaning. He opened his eyes and looked at the small table beside him. A journal sat there closed. Its cover was simple, worn brown leather tied with a thin cord. He untied it slowly and opened to the first blank page. The pen was old, but still worked. His handwriting came slowly, as if the words didn't want to rush either. First night. The ocean is steady. My breath is slower already. I don't know what I'll find here, but I think that's the point. He paused. Then he smiled, just a little. He set the journal down and looked toward the window. Again, the moon was rising, a silver coin slipping out of the clouds, casting a soft path across the sea. He imagined walking across it, step by step into the sky, not to escape, but to drift. He stood and walked to the bed. The blankets felt cool but soft. He pulled them up around his shoulders and sank into the mattress like it had been waiting for him. Outside, the waves continued. The same sound, again and again. Soft, gentle, constant. A lullaby without a singer. Eliot let his eyes close. He didn't need to finish any thoughts. He didn't need to remember or plan. He only needed to rest, and the sea would keep watch. Its rhythm was unchanged. Soft waves curled and fell, pressed gently against the shore, then pulled away like a breath drawn in reverse. It was both presence and silence, like something sacred whispering without voice. Eliot stirred beneath the gray blankets. The light that filtered through the curtainless window was thin and silver, the kind of morning light that comes slowly, like it too is learning to wake up. He sat up. No alarm, no rush. For the first time in years, he felt no pull to check the time. His feet touched the cold wooden floor, and he moved with the deliberate slowness of someone who knew there was nothing he needed to do but exist. He padded barefoot to the window. The sky was overcast, but not heavy, the kind of gray that felt soft, not sad. The sea stretched wide before him, calm, alive, eternal. It felt like a mirror, reflecting back not his face, but his inner stillness. Breakfast was tea and toast, made slowly. The kettle sang softly, echoing in the small kitchen space. He prepared everything by hand. No machines, no shortcuts. It had been a long time since he made something without trying to finish it quickly. As he sat at the table, sipping tea that warmed his chest, he opened his journal. I feel time again, but not as pressure, more like a gentle current. I float in it instead of swim against it. He paused, listening to the ocean. What am I without busyness, without meetings and noise and screens? Am I enough just like this? A gull called out overhead. Eliot didn't look up. He let the sounds be sounds. His fingers traced the grain of the wood table. Rough, but familiar. Real. He thought of Nora. Nora had loved the sea. It was her dream, not his, to live by the coast. They had talked about it for years, always saying, one day, but one day had always been postponed, until the cancer. After she passed, the house had felt wrong. Too many sharp edges. Too much emptiness hidden inside modern perfection. He had sold it, left the city, found this lighthouse through a friend of a friend. The owner was a poet who had moved to France and was looking for someone quiet to care for the place. Eliot had not hesitated. Days passed without needing names. He stopped marking them. No Monday or Friday, only morning and evening, sun and moon, tea and sleep. He took long walks along the shore, letting the ocean wind shape his thoughts like stones smoothed over time. He picked up driftwood, shells, and odd bits of sea glass. Each object felt like it had a story, one that didn't need to be told, only held. At night, he would read from old books by the fire, not for knowledge, just for rhythm. The sea outside continued its endless breathing. He wrote letters he didn't send. He whispered apologies to no one. He laughed out loud once while watching a crab try to steal a pebble from a bigger crab. Slowly, something inside him began to soften. Not heal. Not yet, but loosen. One afternoon, he found an old photograph tucked inside a book on the shelf. It was Nora, young, windswept, holding a seashell to her ear. She was smiling at something he couldn't see. He stared at it for a long time. Then he placed it gently beside the window, so she could see the sea again. And he sat beside it, listening to the waves for hours, not moving, just breathing. Another day, Eliot found an old typewriter tucked beneath the stairs. He carried it to the table, cleaned the dust from the keys, and inserted a fresh sheet of paper. The keys clicked slowly as he wrote. Not a story, not a journal, but small thoughts, scattered like shells on a beach. What would I be if I had never rushed anything? Why is stillness harder than noise? Can grief be quiet and beautiful too? Each click echoed faintly against the wooden walls, syncing with the sound of the waves beyond the glass. He didn't keep the pages. After writing, he would fold them and set them in a glass jar by the window. It wasn't about saving them. It was about letting them exist. On the 10th morning, Eliot stood on the porch with a mug of tea and simply watched the horizon. Clouds passed slowly. Seagulls soared and dipped. The world moved, but not for him. And that was fine, he thought, about how much he used to talk. Now he didn't speak unless he needed to, not even to himself. Silence had become his second skin. And in that silence, he was starting to hear something deeper. Not voices, not memories, not even meaning, just presence. Sometimes he would walk barefoot into the shallows, let the cold, salt water rise to his ankles, then his knees. Let the wind wrap around his shoulders like a scarf. Let himself be small. He no longer needed to feel important. He no longer feared being alone. He welcomed it. One night, the stars were so bright he didn't go inside at all. He lay on a blanket near the lighthouse and looked up, counting them without keeping score. The ocean whispered beside him, a lullaby, made of salt and distance. He imagined Nora beside him, her hand tucked in his. He whispered, "I'm okay," and for the first time, he meant it. The past no longer held his weight. It rested gently behind him, like a coat on a chair, still there, but no longer something he needed to wear. Now the quiet life was not something he had escaped into. It was something he had chosen, and it had accepted him, like the waves. The sky was dark, before Eliot even noticed. One moment, the clouds had been glowing with late afternoon silver. The next, they had melted into a single, deep shadow. Evening arrived not with a bang, but like a heavy blanket draped quietly over the land and sea. Inside the lighthouse, Eliot lit a single lantern. The golden light flickered against the walls, softening the sharp corners of the room. The fire in the hearth had gone low, but it was enough. He didn't want more light than needed. Brightness felt like a kind of noise. The ocean outside was louder tonight. The wind had picked up, and with it, the waves had grown. They struck the shore in thicker, heavier pulses, still rhythmic, but with weight. Eliot stood by the window, hands tucked into the sleeves of his sweater. The sea was nearly black now, dotted only with the shimmer of moonlight breaking through fast-moving clouds. The horizon was invisible. He sipped from a mug of warm milk. It tasted like memory. Behind him, the room creaked. The lighthouse was old, and it spoke in wood and wind. There was something about this night that felt different. Not dangerous, just deeper. Like it had arrived carrying stories of its own. Eliot settled into his chair and pulled a thick blanket over his legs. He opened the journal again but didn't write. The pen rested in his hand like an idea not yet born. Outside, a branch scraped against the side of the building. The wind moaned softly, and then a sudden stillness. The waves paused. Not truly, but in Eliot's mind, they pulled away for a long moment, holding their breath. And he remembered. He remembered the hospital, the sterile halls, the machines that beeped without music, the way time twisted into something cruel and uneven. Nora had smiled even when her body stopped listening. They had watched the sea through a television screen. He had promised her he would go there one day, that he would live slowly like she always wanted to. She had said, "Good. Make it beautiful." Then she had closed her eyes. He had not written in his journal that night. The lantern flickered. Eliot leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The waves returned in his ears, louder, closer, not crashing, but insisting. A tear slid down the side of his face. He did not wipe it away. The wind outside rose to a soft howl. A draft crept through the frame of the window, brushing his skin, like a whisper from the other side. He felt Nora's presence, not as a ghost, but as a stillness beneath the noise. He whispered, "I miss you." The fire popped. Eliot rose and walked slowly to the shelf. He pulled down an old box. Inside were things he had carried here but not opened. Letters, rings, a dried flower pressed between pages. He sat on the floor and opened them one by one. A birthday card with Nora's handwriting. A photo of the two, of them, younger than he felt. A list of books she had wanted to read. One had been crossed off, by her, not him. He read the letters aloud, one after another. Quietly, slowly. The waves outside kept time. At midnight, Eliot walked outside. The air was cold and wet. Mist curled around the base of the lighthouse. The sea was full and loud, breathing deeply in the darkness. He walked to the edge of the rocks, just beyond the porch. He closed his eyes. "If you're here," he said to the wind, "I'm listening." A wave struck the shore, closer than expected. Salt mist touched his face. He smiled, and then, as if by instinct, he began to hum. A tune without words. One Nora had hummed when she made tea. It floated into the wind, thin but steady. He stood there for a long time, humming, remembering, forgiving. Later, back inside, Eliot took a fresh page and began to write. Tonight was heavy, but not unkind. The sea listened, and I spoke. Maybe that's all prayer ever is. There is a night inside me, but it has stars. He closed the journal, placed it by the window, and turned down the lantern. The waves grew softer, again. The wind settled, and in the quiet, Eliot lay down, wrapped in blanket and memory. The stars blinked outside. The sea continued, and he slept. The morning after the heavy night came gently. Eliot awoke not with a jolt or a start, but with the sense that his body had already been awake for some time, just resting, floating. The ocean waves outside continued their slow, eternal rhythm. It was as if they had rocked him through the night. He blinked once, then twice, letting the light fill his vision. The sky outside the window was soft blue, with streaks of pink and gold stretched across it like paint on water. The world was still turning. He sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. The air was cool but not cold. He shuffled to the window and looked out. The sea was calm again, not silent, never silent, but gentle. He felt lighter. After a quiet breakfast, Eliot brewed a second cup of tea and took it outside onto the porch. The wood was still damp from the mist, and the breeze carried the smell of salt and distant flowers. Spring was slowly arriving. He sipped and watched. There was a small bird hopping along the rail. Not a gull, something smaller, brown, curious. It chirped twice and flew off. Eliot smiled. It had been a long time since he'd smiled without thinking first. He didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was the sleep, maybe the tears, maybe the way grief had emptied a little more space inside him, and something gentle had moved in to fill it. He went back inside and sat at the table. He didn't write in the journal right away. Instead, he opened a blank page and drew. His hands moved slowly, sketching the lighthouse, the cliff, the waves. He was no artist, but the lines didn't need to be perfect. They just needed to be honest. Later that day, he walked farther than usual. Down the winding coastal path, past the tide pools, through the seagrass. He found a place where the cliff opened into a small, hidden beach. The sand there was darker, smoother, like it had been touched by fewer feet. He took off his shoes and stepped into the water. It was cold, sharp at first, but not painful. It woke something inside him. A spark, a memory of youth, of running, laughing, splashing with Nora on summer holidays. He let himself walk knee-deep, feeling the sand shift under his steps. The water tugged at him gently like it wanted him to dance. So he did, just a little, and laughed out loud. The sound startled a gull nearby, but Eliot didn't stop. The laugh turned to a quiet chuckle, then a sigh, and silence. But it was a good silence. In the evenings now, Eliot began playing music again. There was an old radio in the corner of the room. He fixed the dial carefully until it found a station playing soft piano pieces, Debussy, Satie, old jazz lullabies. He would sit with the lights low, fire crackling, journal in hand, and let the music float through the room. It didn't interrupt the ocean. It joined it, layered softly above the waves like a melody above a heartbeat. He didn't hum along. He didn't think. He just listened. The days passed like pages turning. He fixed the loose shutter on the lighthouse tower. He planted a few herbs in small pots by the window, mint, thyme, lavender. He wrote a letter to an old friend, not to catch up, but just to say, "I'm okay." He made soup. He watched clouds. He refolded every blanket in the house just because he wanted to. And one morning, he woke before dawn, not from fear or pain, but from anticipation. He made tea, wrapped himself in a scarf, and watched the first light break over the sea. The world was not loud, but it was alive. On the 15th day, a child's kite appeared in the sky. He watched it from the porch, red and yellow dancing above the cliff path. Soon 2 children came running into view, laughing, chasing it. Behind them, a woman, mid-30s, smiling, wind in her hair. They didn't notice Eliot at first, but then the woman waved. He raised his hand. She called out, "We walk this trail every spring. The wind is always good here." Eliot nodded. "It's better than good." She smiled, and they continued on their way. He stood there long after they disappeared. Not because he was lonely, but because he felt connected again to the trail, to the air, to the movement of life. That evening, he made a new entry in his journal. "I no longer dread the quiet. I wait for it, welcome it. Within it, I find pieces of myself I had forgotten. Joy doesn't arrive like a drum. It slips in like the tide, soft, sure." He closed the book and sat by the window. Outside, the sea moved gently, steady as breath. The stars blinked awake, and Eliot, wrapped in calm, let his eyes close. He didn't fall asleep right away. He didn't need to. He was exactly where he belonged. The lighthouse was quiet that night, quieter than usual. Not in the absence of sound, but in the fullness of calm. The ocean outside whispered in its steady rhythm. A breeze slid gently against the stone walls. The air smelled of salt and earth, and the faint perfume of the lavender growing by the window. Eliot sat in his chair by the fire, a soft shawl over his shoulders, tea cooling in his hands. The flames danced low, golden and slow. He didn't need more heat. Just the flicker of light was enough. His journal lay open on the table beside him. The pages filled with steady handwriting, a voice laid down in ink over weeks of quiet living. There was only one page left. He smiled at that. It wasn't an ending. Not really. But it was a kind of closing. A season finishing its bloom. He picked up the pen and wrote, "Tonight I am not waiting for anything. Not for tomorrow, not for understanding, not even for peace. I am simply here. And it is enough." He put the pen down. The page was still half empty, but that too felt right. Some spaces weren't meant to be filled. He stood slowly, knees stiff but heart light. Walked to the window and opened it just a little. The sound of the waves rolled in clearer now, a lullaby of the deep. He took a deep breath, held it, let it go. Behind him, the fire gave one soft crack. He turned back toward the room. It was as he had made it, simple, warm, and still. The photograph of Nora remained on the sill. He touched the frame lightly. "Thank you," he whispered. He didn't say more. Some things had already been said, out loud, in dreams, in the air between moments. He walked to the bed, pulled back the covers, and slipped beneath them. The mattress welcomed him. The pillow smelled faintly of sea and sun. He lay on his back for a moment, looking at the wooden ceiling above. The shadows from the fire flickered like gentle waves. He closed his eyes. Outside, the waves kept moving. Inside, Eliot's breathing slowed. One breath, then another, then stillness. When morning came, the sun rose slowly over the water. The lighthouse stood quiet. The waves rolled on, and in the silence of a life lived softly. The sea carried Eliot's final dreams, gentle, endless, and at peace.